Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
6:07, it's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in to this morning program. Coming up in 30 minutes, Ron Halber of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington on the release of Edan Alexander. 7:05, former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund. He was there on January 6th begging for reinforcements. Nancy Pelosi never picked up the phone. 7:35, Joel Pollack will join us of Breitbart News, talk about his new book. Also, by the way, Joel's from South Africa, so I want him to comment on these South African refugees that we're going to be discussing in just a moment. 8:05, Brad Burnham, Turn Therapeutics. We'll talk to him about the pharmaceutical executive order yesterday. And then at 8:35, Mal Gardner of Heritage. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
You ever been to South Africa?
I never have.
I've kind of wanted to, but then people wave me off of it because it's like it's really dangerous there.
I think there are parts of it that are dangerous, and then there
crime's super nasty problem there.
Yeah. And I mean, Hunter Biden hangs out there, so who wants to go there?
That's right. Hunter goes there, and Elon Musk is from there. So, well, yesterday the United States government opened their arms and welcomed a significant number of refugees fleeing that country. They arrived, by the way, waving American flags and incredibly grateful for the refugee status that they were granted. The left is going nuts about it. Liberals are insane.
We have finally figured out what makes Democrats voice opposition to refugees flooding into our country. There you go.
Yeah, it's either the waving of the American flag or, if you listen to some of the blatant racism on display, the fact that they're white.
Yeah.
The fact that they're white. And they appear to be very grateful to be in America. You know, the illegal immigrants who and they did it legally. They asked for refugee status while still in their country. They didn't just arrive here, crash through our borders, and demand to be accepted.
Right.
They're also fleeing their country under specific, appropriate asylum circumstances. They claim that they are being targeted specifically for political and racial reasons because they claim, as white farmers in South Africa, first of all, there is a legal
it's not just a claim.
Structure in place right now that they call reclamation. This is basically what the left would have America do.
That's right. Absolutely.
To land that they claim has been colonized here.
Right.
They are, and these people have been there for generations. You know, you may not like the fact that the Dutch and British colonized South Africa and displaced people who had been there natively for,
and built infrastructure and roads. We can get it down.
Yes, as is typical with colonization, it has a pretty good upside. That said, if you're the one being colonized, you probably don't like it. And you may not like that. You may not like the fact that these European countries came down to South Africa. But you have to acknowledge the fact that it was, over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And you're deciding to take it out on, the great-great-great-great-grandchildren who are farmers and, are not the ones who did the oppressing. Apartheid was dismantled, 30 years ago.
Right. Right.
But the government now is sanctioning the reacquisition of this land, and people are being murdered because they're white.
Yes.
And what I just described to you is, in fact, a legitimate and legal petition that a person can make for refugee status in the United States of America. Not, I want to come here because I can't find a job in Honduras, and there's gang warfare because MS-13 is running rampant in El Salvador. That may suck for you, but that's not a reason why you can legally come here as a refugee. So Chris Van Hollen, of course, he bends over backwards to make the case for an illegal immigrant MS-13 gang member, but he's now angry at these white Afrikaners who have come here legally through the appropriate process. That's where we are right now in this story.
I think one of my favorite moments was last night. I don't know who she is, some CNN talking head was saying, well, they can just go back to the country from where they came, which was, hundreds of years ago. And that's Holland. Okay. But the idea that like they just went to South Africa 5 minutes ago, right? But again, if we suggest someone who came into the United States 5 minutes ago from El Salvador should go back to El Salvador, we're horrible, right? But she's suggesting these Afrikaners whose, ancestors came from Holland 200 years ago, they should just go back to Holland.
Well, here's the audio that you're referencing.
We have it. Of course we do, Heather. It's amazing.
Part of that is that the people who are native to that land deserve their rightful land back. That is not what the Afrikaners actually want to have happen, which are the white Africans, and so who are not originally from Africa, who colonized South Africa also. And so that is what they are saying is discrimination. Now, if the Constitution in South Africa is discriminatory, they have their checks and balances in that land, just like we do. And that is for them to, so if the Afrikaners don't actually like the land, they can leave that country.
They are. They're leaving to come here.
No. They can
These refugees are coming here.
They can actually leave and go to where their native land is, which is probably Germany.
Are you against them coming here?
Holland.
There you go. And that's, by the way, not just a CNN talking head. That's Ashley Allison. She's the former National Coalitions Director for Biden-Harris 2020.
Good God. Well,
first
of all, she stumbled through that. She stumbled through that. She stuttered through that. I could barely understand what she was saying. But the first thing she did was she defended this horrific policy in South Africa, this racist policy in South Africa, where white people's land can just be taken from them.
Yeah.
Just because they're white. She defended it. She was like, oh, and if they don't like it, there's checks and balances. First of all, that makes no sense. She's ostensibly saying, well, then they can object or elect people that
they can amend their constitution.
Yes.
That's the solution.
That's what she was saying. I mean, can you imagine that you institute this incredibly racist, horrific policy, and she's like, well, just amend the Constitution or vote for people who aren't for that policy.
Right.
Just unbelievable.
Well, but even more objectionable was, and if you don't like it, you can go back to where you came from.
Go back to your country. Yeah.
So let me get this straight. Let me just get this straight. If people have a grievance with their government and they think that it's systemically racist and they're protesting in the streets and they're claiming that they're getting gunned down and murdered in the streets for racial purposes because of systemic racism in the country that they're living in, does this sound familiar? Then the solution is that they should go back to where they came from. So let me just be clear here. If I'm on a CNN panel and somebody's making the case about Black Lives Matter and racial injustice and systemic racism in America, if I turn to that black panelist and say, well, why don't you just go back to Africa if you don't like it here? Would that be okay?
How would that go over?
Is that now considered appropriate, wise, intelligent political analysis? Will I get a job on the next presidential campaign for Kamala Harris with that kind of analysis? Because that's what that lady just said.
Yep.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've got more from MSNBC for that. The outright racism. The only opposition to these refugees is because they're white. No one is denying that they are legal refugees seeking asylum the legal way with a correct pathway here.
Well, we're up against, but
we are. Hold your thought. 6:15 WMAL. I would have let you go, but since you pointed it out, now the boss heard it.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
And they got this big celebration, and these are the only, white African descendants of apartheid, the European colonials, or those who participated in apartheid. They're of all ages, including children.
South Africa says that the allegations about persecution of these people, the allegations are false, according to the South Africans. What?
That's my favorite part. NBC News there, MSNBC, you heard Andrea Mitchell, again, pointing out it's very important to everybody that they point out that these people are white. It's fascinating to me that that's critically important in the news coverage here. But then the news anchor jumps in and says, by the way, the government who is being accused of systemic racism and potential genocide, they're denying it. Well, that should be good enough for all of us because that's journalism.
Right. And you had other denials out there yesterday. I mean, CNN was just all over this. Deny that there's any problems in South Africa. These people are here for no reason. They just, are, again, come in legally, waving American flags, babies on their hips, obviously families coming into this community that are going to integrate really well into our communities, and nothing makes CNN madder than that. And again, after what we witnessed, the defense of these monsters in these jails, child rapists, murderers, the passionate defense of these people from the Democrats, and then just as passionately outraged by these very nice people who seem very excited to be in the country legally.
Again, I do wonder if it's their white skin or the fact that they're waving the American flag and they sought refugee status legally. You may disagree with the Trump administration granting asylum status. I don't know why, based on if you're from the left, you want to give asylum status if people can't get a job, which is completely outside the bounds of being a political refugee and getting asylum. But you can't deny that they've done it the legal way. They petitioned in their country. There was a pathway for them to come here, and so the asylum has been granted. But you got to be Donna Edwards. You got to be the brilliant former congresswoman from Maryland, who, by the way, looks like she's been having a rough time. She was on MSNBC, and she outright accused Trump of being racist for doing this. Here's cut 7.
In my view, what makes it different is that they are white South Africans. The president, in my view, has not hidden his racism behind a bushel. In fact, in his policies, whether it's removing government workers or, in this case, admitting white South Africans while denying refugee status, asylum seekers from other countries, principally Central and South American and Black nations, to come into this country. And so I think that, this policy, while it's not surprising in this action, really speaks of the underlying message in this that disrespects and shows disdain for people of color while embracing these Afrikaners now, and also expediting the process by which they can come into the country while denying that same process to other refugees.
Because the other refugees, first of all, have been flooding into this country by tens of millions for the last 4 years without any check at all. So you're allowed to say, okay, that's enough now, number one. And number two, nobody can make the case that they have legitimate asylum purposes
status
for being here. They can do, well, they want a better life. There's no job there. They want more money. Fine, but that's not asylum.
But also, Donna Edwards forgets that we've been focused on the illegal immigration coming into this country, people walking over the border, sneaking in, right? Legal immigration has continued in this country. We continue to have a legal process that it's not exactly working. It's all broken, but people are still entering this country legally. Like
by the hundreds of thousands.
By hundreds of thousands. So people are, and they're coming in from South America. They're coming in from Asia. They're coming in from all over the world. And now there are different restrictions. We sort of set limits on different countries. But legal immigration is happening in this country. It's not just with South Africa. It's not like we've closed to everybody and then we just let this pocket of South Africans in. No, we have a legal process. It is ongoing. We have been overrun with illegal aliens, but it does not mean that legal immigration isn't happening. It is. And it's not just white South Africans.
Well, listen, this has been a fascinating glimpse into the outright and permitted, if not encouraged, racist dialogue that goes on in the newsrooms at these cable news stations. And a complete lack of understanding not only of our own country's asylum laws, but also of the history of South Africa and what I assure you, these people would love to stay in their country. They would love to stay in South Africa and live out peacefully, farming their land, but they are literally being murdered because they're white and they own land. That's a textbook example of how somebody can seek asylum in this country. Joining us later in the program is someone who does know South African history. He's actually from South Africa and married a South African woman, a lovely woman, a member of the United States Navy. I think she's still active duty. Joel Pollack, senior editor and friend of mine at Breitbart News. He'll join us at 7:35 on this. Right now it's 6:23.
coming up, we're going to talk to Ron Halber. He's CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. He's going to talk about the release of Edan Alexander. He was the American Israeli who was held by Hamas since October 7th, 2023. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it here. It's 6:30.
WMAL-FM Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's WMAL's morning program, O'Connor and Company, and we appreciate you joining us for it. At 7:05, former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund, man who stepped aside with dignity after the January 6th events, and now we're going to find out what's going on with the chief as we get more information about what really happened that day and what didn't happen. At 7:35, Joel Pollack, as I just mentioned, will join us, and then at 8:05, Brad Burnham of Turn Therapeutics. He's CEO there, and he has many opinions about this prescription drug plan from President Trump. 8:35 now, Gardner Heritage Foundation, keeping an eye on the Brits. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
A day many of us had been praying for finally happened yesterday as Edan Alexander, and as American Israeli, who had been held hostage since October 7th. That's nearly 600 days. Was finally released. Ron Halber joins us now to discuss it. He, of course, is the CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. It's obviously, we're thankful, we're happy, we're grateful, we are overjoyed. I literally cried for the family, putting myself in their place, finally being reunited with their young boy who they said goodbye to, or never got to say goodbye to, but was taken from them at the age of 19. And to imagine these years being kept in captivity, it's just heartbreaking. But, Ron, I'm also, frankly, still a little bitter that it took this long and that we still have hostages being held by Hamas.
Yes, and first of all, thank you for having me. Good morning. I think it is bittersweet. I mean, it is wonderful for the family, and we all thank God that Edan is back home. But there are, several dozen hostages, many probably of whom are dead. And we want to retrieve their bodies, and about 20 about whom we estimate are alive. We want to see their families have the same joy in reuniting with their families that we saw Edan have yesterday.
So what was the final diplomatic effort here? Because I know President Trump has been pretty unequivocal, make this happen or all hell is going to come raining down on you. And Hamas always seems to sort of show some kind of demonstration at the last minute that sort of stays off that all hell raining down on them. But was the difference here the fact that diplomatically the president was about to touch down in Saudi Arabia and the right people called the right shots to make sure that it looked good?
Well, the timing of the president's trip to Qatar and other Arab states certainly had a lot to do with it. But I don't think this was really the president threatening Hamas, because sometimes when the United States threatens Hamas, it's hard to imagine what the United States could do to them when Israel hasn't already gone ahead and done to Hamas militarily. I think this is what they were trying to do is please the president and to get him to move a little, to help him. They wanted to please the president so that he would put more pressure on the Israelis, hopefully, in upcoming negotiations. And that seems to have worked, as Israel immediately sent out a hostage negotiating team to Doha to restart the negotiations. But the truth is, everybody should know, the credit to this belongs to the president of the United States. President Trump is the one who got Edan out of Israel and out of Gaza. It was Edan alone. In fact, the Israelis weren't even informed about it until the deal had been reached with Hamas, which, of course, in some ways makes one wonder about what's going on with the relationship between the United States and Israel in general.
I'm wondering about the conditions and plans for the remaining hostages. I think that you said the word bittersweet. This is bittersweet, but I imagine in Israel there's some fear because now that there's no more Americans, there's got to be fear that the Americans won't focus on the remaining. I think they will, but I'm sure there's fear that will sort of stop thinking about the remaining hostages, and there is so much worry about those remaining hostages. What is the plan to get those remaining hostages, and you said probably some bodies, back to Israel?
Well, they're at an impasse, and the point that has always gone ahead and stopped a deal from concluding has been the fact that Israel has insisted that Hamas must lay down their arms. Yes. That's been the sticking point. Everything else they pretty much can negotiate. Everybody knows that Hamas would be the leadership would be sent into exile. A transitional Arab Authority would put in place to govern Gaza. Food and humanitarian aid must be resumed, and that in the end it's hard. But those are key for Israel. It's the dismantling of the military terrorist machine, which went ahead and killed 1,200 people and took hundreds hostage on October 7th. For Israel, it's very hard to see how Israel could claim victory, total victory, as the Prime Minister has said, without the removing of armaments, and Hamas refuses to do it. I think they can come. They've stopped the war several times for temporary ceasefires to get rid of hostages, but I think that's the remaining sticking point. I think if Israel agreed to, quote, end the war, his right-wing coalition would fall, and he would be out of power, but that's the condition that would bring home. That's what would bring home the hostages. He's also concerned that if he were to go ahead and to agree to that, it would look like capitulation, and Israelis would say, why did we fight this battle? Yes, we may have killed 18,000 Hamas fighters. Yes, we may have gone ahead and done dramatic, but did we really win the war, considering Hamas is still governing the Strip?
Yeah. And that sort of leads us to the final question. Is there an end to this war if Hamas is still left standing?
Well, again, when you say things like total victory, you're speaking in very Churchillian terms, and I don't know if one country fighting another country is the same. You can use the same criteria to win a battle as if you're fighting an embedded terrorist group. So there is a way, of course. There is a way to end this, and for a couple things. Number one, hostages obviously have to be returned. Two, Hamas's leadership, at a minimum, has to be kicked out of the country. Three, if Hamas is not running the day-to-day affairs, and another entity can take physical control of Gaza and then deal with the disarmament, and there's a plan for it, then the Israelis can claim victory. I mean, to me, claiming victory, this is a very complex situation. If I were Gaza, if I were Hamas, and I had to wake up the next morning and declare victory and show that we had lost all these people, we had lost lost half of our fighters, and we had led to the destruction of the Strip, I hardly think that constitutes victory. But I think your listeners need to know one thing. 89% of people who live in Gaza do not believe that Hamas terrorists committed those atrocities on October 7th, according to a recent poll. How do you negotiate? When the people who are being governed don't even believe that the atrocities committed by their own leadership took happen? So we're in an impasse. I do think it's possible. I think it can happen, but the victory will not look like, I think, what most of us think. And I believe that if should it happen, the Israeli government will topple, which I predict will happen within the next 6 months.
Thanks for joining us. I don't want to lose sight that it is a joyful occasion.
No,
and
please.
These are answered prayers.
Of course, it's a joyful occasion, and it's wonderful that he's home. But it's like, there's a Jewish saying, basically summarized. It says, every person is a world. And that means there's still 21 worlds that are being held hostage, and the worlds of several dozen people have been destroyed because their loved ones are in Israel or in Gaza. We're waiting to bring them home for a proper burial.
Yeah, well said. Well said. As usual, Ron Halber, the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. Thank you, sir. 6:45.
WMAL's Vince Colonnese, weekdays at noon on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
Doing that.
Yeah, the one thing is they are saying they will not be allowed to start for 18 months.
No, that will not be the case.
Okay, I just hope you're right.
You can hold me to it.
4 groups said that.
No.
That would be they should be able to do it. They should be able to start tonight.
That will not be the case. First we have to take care to make sure that there's not getting rid of the hazardous waste, cleaning things up.
You remember that scene in Los Angeles when President Trump, alongside his wife Melania Trump, the First Lady, and Ambassador Rick Grinnell, a Southern California native, sat with a public forum in the Palisades after the devastating fires swept through that area. That was L.A. Mayor Karen Bass, who is proving herself to be more incompetent than Gavin Newsom, which really tells you something. where they had a confrontation over the permitting process when Trump said we should start it tonight. Let them work. Let them go. Yeah. He has lifted all federal red tape from this. So if there's any delays, it's the city of L.A., the county of Los Angeles, and the state of California. So Jim Garrity over at National Review has done a follow-up where coming up on 4 months later, and so far, L.A. County has issued a grand total of 7 permits.
Oh, my gosh.
7. Every single homeowner in the Palisades where that fire swept through, for nearly 4 months now, they're just sitting and waiting for permission to go ahead and rebuild their home. It's absolutely astounding.
There's a tweet out there, Audrey Fahlberg. She says, if this pace continues, L.A. County will issue 26 rebuild permits per year. That means the Pacific Palisades and Altadena will be rebuilt within 461 years.
Yes.
I mean, I'm laughing.
Yeah, we're aiming
but
at
it's actually
2486 is what we're aiming for here. This is in Jim Garrity's column. He's done the math. Because there are 12,000 parcels of land with burnt debris. And it's awful. And so here we go. This is, we talked about the predictions that eventually left-wing Democrats, celebrities would start complaining.
Yes,
well, we've got one, Mandy Moore, who endorses Democrats, now complaining, saying that it's maddening, it's heartless. She was a big Kamala Harris supporter back before the
She
fires.
voted for this. This is what you get.
This is exactly what she voted for, and it's going to stay this way until they vote for something else. It's 6:52. Did I mention Rick Grinnell was there? Boy, he'd make a great governor, wouldn't he? It's 6:52.